Hello everybody, we're back again with some Photoshop lessons for you. Today we're going to be looking at making a web page. And so I thought we would actually put together a Lifehacker page since, this is on Lifehacker. Normally when you're making a website, you want to do some planning ahead of time. Think about what you might want it to look like, have some ideas of layout in your head, all of those things. Get a sketch pad, draw it out, etc. You want to think about your design a little bit. We're not going to do that today. I haven't really thought out this design at all. We're just going to look at how to make it. What are we going to make? I don't know yet. We're just going to try and go ahead and make a web page. So, can't promise anything spectacular, but I can promise you that we are going to learn how to use the tools to actually put together interface elements and mock up a web page. So let's get started. I have put together a couple of things I did know we'd need, like the Lifehacker logo, a mini logo, some feature images, smaller ones and larger ones, and some ads, because we have to make money on this page, and featuring advertising is going to get us there. So let's get started. Let's start by bringing in the Lifehacker logo, and I'm just going to copy that and paste it into here. So that's obviously quite a bit larger than we would like, but there it is. So let's say we want to put it over here because we want to feature it prominently. It is Lifehacker. I'm going to hit Command-T to just shrink it down a bit, and then I'm going to zoom in on the page here. So we're looking at 100%. So there's Lifehacker. What might work is having some sort of toolbar here where people can access stuff. So how do we make a toolbar? Well, the first thing you're going to want to do is figure out the shape. You're going to want some sort of rectangle or rounded rectangle. So I'm going to create a new layer, Command-Shift-N or Control-Shift-N on the PC. We're going to call that toolbar, and we're going to call this layer Lifehacker logo. You're going to be getting a lot of stuff together here, so you don't want to be creating a bunch of layers and not naming them, otherwise you're going to have a really hard time organizing or finding your way through things later. So it's very important that you organize as you're moving along. So I'm going to say let's make a rectangle. I'm going to make it a regular rectangle, not a rounded one, and we'll make that grayish there. So I'm just setting my color over here in the toolbar. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start drawing this rectangle out like that. There we go. Now we have a rectangle. Now that doesn't look so good on here, so I'm going to do two things. One, we want to change the color of this, and then also I want to give it a white outline so it's kind of eating into the toolbar. I'm going to double click on the empty space by Lifehacker logo to bring up the layer styles options, and I'm going to say give it a stroke. Now we don't want a black stroke because that's just going to make it look really thick. We want a white stroke so it looks like it's cutting itself out of the space. And then I'm just going to up the size here a little bit, and we'll move that around once we get out. Let's say something like that. There we go. And then what we're going to want to do is change the color of this logo here. So I'm going to command click the logo over here to select it, and then I'm going to fill that in with a green color instead. So you can do this a couple of ways. You can use the paint can, hit G on your keyboard to bring that up and fill it in like that, or you can just take the paintbrush, make it big enough, and then just paint on over that. Okay, so now we have a Lifehacker logo. This could probably stand to be a bit smaller. Alright, so we got that started off, and we'll make some alterations to this along the way, but let's just keep moving along. Next we have to actually have some things in the toolbar, and let's make those options some of the standard Lifehacker options. I'm just choosing white as my color for those options here, and I'm going to use the font League Gothic. And so, hitting my caps lock, I'm going to say Windows, Windows, let's make this left align, and set that up here, Mac, Linux, and then mobile. Give this a little bit more space. Now if I want to adjust this text in any way, I can select the text. I'm hitting Command H to hide it so I can see it better. Command T to bring up this panel here. This is all pretty much, if I say command anything, it's basically control anything on the PC, by the way. And I can adjust the font sizes as I please. We're going to make these a little smaller because we want to leave room for some other stuff too. Then I'm just going to give this a little bit more space in there. Okay, and then I press Command Return to set those changes that I made. So we've got that in there. I think maybe we should make this rectangle a little bit smaller. So I'm going to hit Command T to transform that. See how big we actually need to make this. A lot of your site design choices are going to involve making changes after the fact. You're going to think you want something one way, and then you're going to find you don't. So there we go. That actually doesn't look that great, but let's keep going anyway. We want to keep this site design moving. Okay, so here we are, and these are the toolbar options. And I'm just going to select all these layers now and create a new group. Command G to create a group. You can also find that in the layers menu and choose group layers to do that, to create a group. And I'm going to name that group toolbar. There we go. So now we can move this whole thing around by just grabbing the toolbar group instead of selecting all the layers individually. So what do we want to do next? We need to put in some sort of search functionality. So I'm going to create a new layer called search, and in that I'm going to create a rounded rectangle, and we can up the radius of the edges here to 10 pixels, and just make a little search thingy. There we go. Just moving that around. And let's give it an inner shadow. Whoops. Click on the outside space to bring up the layer style. Inner shadow. Adjust it as you wish to get the effect that you want. There we go. And then I'm going to add some text that says search. Now we're not going to use Lead Gothic for this font. We'll just use something more standard like Arial, since that's a web-safe font, and reduce the size of that a bit. Then we also should make the color a little bit lighter, because people are going to click that and it's going to go away. And italicize it. Just stylize it however you want to take care of that, except not bold. Okay, so let's move that into place. There we go. Now we have a search box. Now the one more thing that I would like to do here is have a selected state for these items in the toolbar. But first, before we do that, actually, let's continue on with our organization and group the search box. So now we have search the text and search the box in one folder. Okay, now I'm going to create a selected state on the toolbar, and I'm going to create a new layer called selected state. And let's say we have Mac selected. It's going to select this area. Now I could fill this in with paint, but I'm going to stick to using vector shapes. So we're going to select this, say the color is pretty much black, and then create a vector shape here. And then you can see this area is the selected area. And you can even go ahead and change the colors if you want to for when something's selected. But this can be like the rollover state for when you go over each item. It turns a little bit darker to show that it's selected. So now we're all done with our toolbar. Cool. Moving on, we are going to need to create the actual page. So let's start with featuring a story. I'm going to take this feature image here from Whitson's feature, which got zoomed in by accident. There we go. I'm going to copy that, and we're going to make that the featured story on the web page. Just going to line that up and move it. Cool. Got that going. And then it's a little big, but let's see how it fits in with an ad if we need to make this image any smaller. So let's take this ad here. That got zoomed in too. And see if this ad fits nicely on this side of the screen. It does. Okay, so that size works quite well. Now, we'll call this advertisement, and we'll call this featured feature. Now we have these all nicely lined up, but maybe you're having trouble lining things up and getting them aligned perfectly. Sometimes I use the marquee to just see if things are right, lined up the way that I want them to be, because you can tell if they both hit the edge there. But really the proper way to do it is to bring up your rulers. So hit Command or Control R to bring up your rulers, and then you can actually drag guides off of the rulers, and it will show these guides that say, okay, well here I'm just setting some margins so I know where certain areas hit and how much space I have. And this makes it really easy to get your designs accurate because you have these guides that are helping you out. So you can just drag these in there as necessary. But if you don't want them around, you can hit Command or Control H to hide them or show them again. And that's the easiest way to get rid of them. So there's our add space. It's getting some good guides in here. And then if you have snap enabled, when you're moving things around, they'll actually snap to these guides. So it can make it really easy to position things properly. There we go. I'm going to save things up because we made a few changes. And one more guide. Now we got to add some text to this feature area. So let's make a new text box, and I'm going to click and drag that text box so it's about the width of what we're dealing with here. There we go. How to ergonomically optimize your workspace by Whitson Gordon. Now, we don't want this font because it's tiny and it's italicized, so we don't necessarily want that. We're going to select that, and since we're probably going to have to use web-safe fonts unless you've explored using server-side fonts and those features in CSS, we're just going to assume that this is what we're stuck with. So let's just keep using Arial, and I'm going to make it bold, and I'm going to increase the size of this so it fits to more of the full length. But let's say that we're using regular sizes, and 24 point is what we're going for. So then we've got that, and then we've got Whitson here, who actually probably could be italicized. And then we're going to need the lead for his story. You can put whatever placeholder text you want in here, but I happen to have that lead ready, so I'm just going to paste that in. And we'll say that's regular. Okay, so now we've got our feature space. The only thing we probably need here is a read more button. So let's just add to that text more. And you can change, as we've seen here, font styles in all sorts of spots in your text box. It doesn't have to be the same text. It doesn't even have to be the same font. So I'm just going to go ahead and take more, and we're going to call that bold, and change that color to a green link text, since that's the color we've been using so far. So we could go like that, and then since this is a link, we might want to have it underlined, and you can make more text alterations than you see in these built-in styles by going to your text palette. And you'll see here's an underline option. Underline that because it's a link. There we go. It's a little thicker than most underlines will be on a web page, but that's just, really Photoshop's going to render text quite a bit differently than your browser will, so there are going to be those discrepancies. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now we need to get a couple of other posts on this front page here. To do that, I've created a file with 4 other images in it, lead images for posts, and so I'm just going to start by copying each one of those. They are a bit smaller than this big image, so we can feature them less prominently on the page. And there we go, we'll just place that one there. And let's go get another one. We'll take this one, just copying and pasting these over, and then they get a little bit of spacing like that between each other. Maybe they ought to be a little bit bigger. I'm just going to move these down a little bit. Okay, so now we need some text underneath them. We will sample that color, which is the almost black, so it's the same. Make another text box. And this will be how to detect computer viruses you've never heard of. I believe the title was something like that, but it was shorter. So we don't need that underline anymore. And we probably want the text to be a little bit bigger than 14, so let's make it 18. Oh, but now it doesn't fit in the box. So I'm just going to drag this down so we are able to see all of it. And there we go, we've got one of our posts. I'm going to duplicate this layer so we have the same text box over here. How to block spam text messages on your cell phone. And there we go, we've got that headline there. So those are two. Now we have the thumbnails and their text, so I'm just going to group these two together. You can see that one, now they're grouped together. And we'll call that computer viruses. And then how to block spam. And then I'm going to group these two folders into another folder and call that little features. So we're just going to go ahead and do the same thing for the other pictures, and we'll skip ahead for that part. So as you can see, I've added two more down here, and what I've also added is a more stories panel on this side. Now the one thing this is missing really is a scroll bar, so let's create one. These are really easy to make. So I'm just going to go here, select this background color, make it a little bit darker so we can see the scroll bar, and then we'll just create one that blends in here with a rectangle. That'll do. Okay, so that might be a little too dark, so let's go ahead and lighten that up. There we go. Now what we need are some buttons at the end of it, and the easiest way to actually make a triangle up and down button is to not use a shape, but to use text. And if you have the lovely WebDings font, a good thing to remember is what the number 4 can give you, and that is a play button. So we're going to go ahead and actually make that white. Can't see it right now, but we'll make it a little larger. Rotate it so it's facing upwards, drag it over here, and there we go. We've got a scroll bar. And then we'll make a duplicate of that, transform it around, move that down to the bottom, maybe not that far down to the bottom, and create a scroll bar arrow down there. And then we can also have some nice little thing that you can hold on to, scroll handle, we'll call it. Put that right there, and that's just another rectangle. So you can see how nicely and easily those shapes can be made. And now we have a scroll bar. That wasn't hard at all. I'm just going to group this all together, call it scroll bar. And now we have a nice little more stories panel that can be browsed through to find more posts. So this web page isn't done, and we're probably not going to get to an entire site design because that stuff's going to get really tedious. Because it basically ends up being, when you're finishing things off at this point, making some stuff at the bottom that's just like, okay, this is, you know, where the about links are or what other stuff you can add to the homepage, and that can be fairly simple. I mean, we could just do something like this, center the text, about. Oop, maybe we would like to have that in a readable font. About one. And we'll put a little pipe there, more information, some other link, contact us, share on Facebook, or whatever. So now we've got this here, and we've got some minor navigation right at the bottom. Okay, so you can put some other stuff down here if you want to add more features or whatever. One last thing I'd like to look at adding to this page is some additional contextual navigation. And that's why I left the space up here. Thought about this a little bit. And I thought we could put some contextual navigation there. So let's grab the logo, but let's grab the mini logo. Remove the background and just copy that. And paste it onto here. And we'll shrink that down so it fits into that space above. Remove that. And that will be our home indicator. And like we saw before, we can use the play button, also known as 4, in web dings. Say, okay, we're moving to the next page. So this won't necessarily show up unless we click an article. And then we can have an article that's called How to Ergonomically Optimize Your Workspace. And let's just say that has a main tag of ergonomics. I don't know if that's actually the case. Go back to Arial, align that properly. Ergonomics. Make that bold. So now we're inside the ergonomics tag. Let's just duplicate this 4. And now if you hold down Alt-Option and drag, you can make a copy really easily that way. Another one of those. And then let's just copy that text to make the title of the article. How to ergonomically optimize your workspace. And we don't need to be that bold because it's the actual title of the page we're on. Okay, so now we have some nice little contextual navigation there. I'm going to go ahead and group this together. Call that contextual navigation. We'll put this in a group in case we ever add more to it later. Call that footer. Move it up there, because our footer is this thing down here. And now basically we have a almost finished web page. Now there's other stuff you can add to this, but this should give you a basic understanding of how you can put together a website in Photoshop and mock it up to see how it looks and get what you want. This is by no means perfect, but it is a functional design here. So that's pretty much it. It's really just using the shape tools and the text tool and aligning things in an attractive way. Once you kind of got those tools down and you're using your guides to help you out, you can really put together some very compelling web designs in Photoshop and then start saving them out. So the last thing before we go is taking a look at saving out some of these things. Now when you hand this over to a developer, they're going to really appreciate that you have these categorizations. What they're also going to need potentially is exports of the graphics that you were using. So most of this stuff here is going to be dynamically populated, but you're going to need to export things like, say, this mini Lifehacker logo at the size it is. So you can do this by slicing up and using Photoshop to kind of name and do all of that, but I find the easiest thing to do when you're just exporting a couple of graphics is just to copy them, make a new file, and then go to File and choose Save for Web and Devices. And this will let you choose a JPEG or a PNG depending on what file size makes the most sense. In this case, a ping might be smaller. Yeah, it's a tiny bit smaller because it's just really basic. And then you can also add transparency if it's a ping 24. And then you just save it, and it will save it out as an optimized web file. And that's how you get your graphics ready for the web. So you do that for any graphics that can't really be dynamically generated, like the logo. That's going to be persistent. This mini logo here is going to be persistent. But these things will be put into the CMS content management system, that is, in this case. You also might need to export these little play buttons, for example, and perhaps this scroll bar. But basically, that's all you need to do to get your images ready for the web. And then you can hand them off to the developer, and they'll have everything they need, and you'll have designed a website. So that's how you do it. Thanks for watching.